This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites, like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies, like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first call your parents to say I'm sorry, and then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee for your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th.
We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
Each episode, our special guest will bring with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is writer and director Dave Marmor. His debut feature film is the psychological thriller 1BR, which is now streaming on Netflix. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, we're super excited to talk with you both about your movie and also the movie you brought with you. But before we get into that, how did you get into horror?
Well, it's a bit of a winding path there, really. You know, I grew up loving all kinds of movies, but I really kind of grew up with like in the Spielberg era, and I was very into, you know, like Raiders of the Lost Ark was one of my early favorite movies. And then I think it was like, I would say it was like junior high. I had this friend up the street who just really liked horror movies, and I would just walk over to his house on the weekend and watch horror movies with him. And one of the early ones I remember watching there and just like being blown away by was An American Werewolf in London.
Oh yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah, it's just such, and like looking back on it, like I still love that movie, but it's such an odd way into horror because it's such a weird movie. Like it's such kind of like half comedy, half horror, but like genuinely scary.
At one point, there's Nazi werewolves. Like it's so like bizarre.
It's really a strange movie, but just so cool. So that was a real entry point for me. And then I had another friend who I used to like all through high school. We watched like all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. We watched, you know, like Pet Sematary. I remember just scaring the bejesus out of me. So I got really, really into it then. You know, but the funny thing is, like, I don't actually like consider myself like a horror person, really. Like, I love horror, but I also love, you know, pretty much every other genre. And I never like the funny thing about One Bedroom is it's actually the only horror script I've ever written.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's not even like properly horror, right? Like it's, you know, it's kind of a weird hybrid of genres.
Yeah.
But you know, having done it now, I'm like super stoked to do more horror. Partly just because like the horror fan community is so warm and welcoming and like just passionate and interested in a way that, you know, I've been to lots of film festivals with other movies and other projects and stuff, and never have had like people just be as sort of keyed in and engaged as with this one.
Yeah, horror fans, as we know and as we are like a really warm community and really intense community. But it's usually a good thing. I think everyone's always so excited when a new, even horror adjacent movie comes out, and so stoked. Especially now when like everything, you can't go to the theater and everything's weird. It's like there's so many cool things coming on streaming, like your film and so many others, and it's like, you better be watching these movies. You don't have anything else to do. Like, right. and it's like, it's cool. That people will have more access, and like there's maybe more time to people to hear about it than like with a big studio film. So that's like a sad silver lining.
No. I mean, honestly, like, you know, as terrible as the pandemic has been in almost every way, like, you know, the timing was weirdly good for our movie because we had our festival run already. Like, we were just finishing our festival run when it hit. And we had our distributor lined up. And the only thing that happened really was we didn't get our theatrical run, which, you know, would have been really nice for my ego. And it would have been nice to, like, you know, go to a premiere and everything. But it, you know, was never where this movie was going to make its money. And like, I think the fact of everyone being stuck at home and looking for things to watch, and, you know, thematically the movie, I think is a little bit relevant to sort of the moment everybody is in right now too. I think it's been strangely good for the movie in some ways.
Yeah, I would not want to be trapped in an apartment like that.
Yeah, I mean, like at any time, I don't think you would. But...
Obviously, no, but it's just funny even now to think about it.
Yeah.
Like, anyway, I have lots of feelings about being trapped in apartments with bad people.
Oh, boy. Sounds like you have some stories.
Oh, yes, we'll get to those. So, what, as an adult, you kind of talked about what draws you to horror now, but what was the last film that really scared you or reminded you of what it was like to be scared as a child, watching scary movies as a child?
You know, it's funny. Like it's hard to really scare me now. Like I've seen so many movies. I'm so jaded, and like half the time when I watch a movie now, I'm just sort of like going like, "Oh, that was cool. How'd they do that?" So it's hard to really engage me. I think like, and this might not be really the last movie that's really scared me, but the one that's coming to mind right now, and it's a specific moment. Was It Follows, which is, you know, just like such a great movie. Or, I mean, I a little bit like, I don't love the last like third of it, where it gets a little more concrete. But when it's like the first 2/3 where it's just this like, it has this kind of nightmare logic to it and everything's so weird. And then there's that moment in the kitchen where, I don't know if you remember this, where it takes the form of this woman. And she's like, I don't know if she's like a down and out prostitute, or it looks like it's somebody who something terrible happened to. And she's walking slowly across the kitchen floor toward Maika Monroe. And at some point she starts peeing on herself.
Oh my God, you're right.
Oh, yes.
That is all coming flooding back to me all of a sudden. Wow.
That is like, I think it's the only time in the last like 5 years that I can remember being like truly deeply terrified by a movie. Like it was just, it's so wrong on so many levels.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to revisit that film because like I honestly, outside of like the finale at the pool and the one scene that always like trips me out of, I think they're in a bedroom and like the giant man just starts walking through the door.
Yes.
Like that's the only scenes that I really remember about that movie. I need to go check that one out again.
Yeah, it's worth. I think it, like I've seen it a couple times. It at least those like first 2/3 really hold up.
So it kind of sounds like you don't really get that childhood fear of watching horror anymore. I kind of understand that. You know, as someone that watches horror movies all the time, you kind of get jaded.
Yeah.
you need like a bigger and bigger fix every time, right?
I watched a movie last week that it made me jump so hard I tweaked my neck. So like that was a pretty cool experience.
What was that one?
Mockingbird. It's a found footage film by Brian Bertino, who did The Strangers.
Yeah, okay.
It's his typical fucked up, like
super
bleak,
grim.
The destruction of the family and like all that good stuff. But I really enjoyed it. And again, I jumped so hard I tweaked my neck. So like, I feel like I should put that on the DVD cover, right? Should we tell people to put that on the cover? I think.
There you go. Yeah. Do you have a favorite horror movie as an adult now?
Probably do. I mean, I think, you know, like, I mean, I always, if I'm thinking of sort of my top few, it really, you know, it's funny. Sorry, I'm giving you a very evasive answer, but like, it kind of depends how you're rating. Okay.
Yeah.
So like, in terms of like what I think is the horror movie that is the best movie, I would say The Shining.
Okay.
Which is just because it's just like, it's so perfectly made, and it's really scary and really disturbing, but it's also like, it's about something in a really deep way. And obviously there's a whole movie about how people disagree about what it's about. But like, it's just, that to me is like a singular piece of cinema that is also a horror movie.
Yeah.
In terms of like, what is the scariest movie? For me, that is hands down the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because it's just like, I watched that movie. It's hard for me it's far from being my favorite because like, it's rare that I want to watch it because it's so upsetting.
Yes.
Like,
You just tweeted about that, Mary Beth.
I did. I just wrote an article about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I said it's hard for me to conceptualize how much I love this movie and how much I hate watching it.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's just like, it's awful. Like, and it has this like, this documentary quality that's part of just from it being so cheaply made, I think. And also but it just, there's no music. There's just those weird sound effects happening. And then like, you get to the end of that thing and what she's been through, you come away and she got away, but I'm just like, she is not okay. Like this person is scarred.
She was fucked for life.
Scarred for life.
Yeah,
Hey.
exactly.
So yeah, those are a couple answers.
Those are really good choices.
So 1BR currently streaming on Netflix. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about it before we dive into it a little bit more?
Yeah, I'm bad at talking about my own movies, but I mean, it's on, essentially it's about a young woman who is moving cross country, moving to LA to pursue dreams in the film industry, and also kind of trying to get away from a bad family situation. And she happens into, or I think she would think lucks into an apartment in this complex, which seems to offer kind of a lot of the things that are missing from her life. She's a bit lonely at the beginning, and it turns out to be a bad decision, I guess. I don't know like whether people have seen the movie or not, but like, I feel like this is a movie that rewards knowing as little as possible about it when you go
I will
in.
definitely agree with that. Terry watched it before I did, and it was like a while ago, and he was like, do not look up anything, like go in knowing nothing. And it really does like make the experience of the film like even more like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, I think so. Like we worked really hard to try to, this was something that I worked on even in the writing, just to try to make it, it goes in a way that where I hope is not the way that you think it's going to go in the first sort of 15, 20 minutes.
I would agree with that.
And we worked really hard with the distributor, Dark Sky. They were really great, and they gave us a lot of input in the marketing, especially the trailer. And we must have driven them crazy because like we went back and forth on the trailer because there's like it's hard to show anything in the trailer without spoilers.
Yeah.
But I think they came up with something that is doesn't really give it away, but gives enough of a flavor of what it's going to be that it's intriguing. But it was really hard for them to do.
So what was your inspiration for the film? Did you have a horrific experience in an apartment that you wanted to write about?
No, it's funny. Like the seed of it, the original seed of it was that I moved down here for film school when I was about Sarah's age. And I moved into an apartment that was really similar to the one in the movie. There wasn't anything specific that happened. It was just I found the whole experience really surreal and kind of frightening. And it was like it was partly that I felt very isolated there. I was pretty far from campus, so I didn't really have any friends around, and also just like, I'd never lived, I'm looking back on it now and like, I'd lived in a kind of a suburban environment growing up. And then I went off to college, which was in a little bit more of an urban environment. And, college is obviously its own thing. It's a very kind of socially tight-knit situation.
Yeah.
And this was my first time coming to a city where I didn't know anybody by myself and then living in this apartment by myself. And I think I'd never felt so isolated in my life. And there was something about walking around those breezeways and, it's LA, so it's sunny and it's beautiful and there's palm trees and everybody would, we'd all wave to each other, but I didn't know anybody's name. It never went beyond a wave. And, you know, it sort of occurred to me that like I'm sharing walls with these people. If something bad happened in my life, these are the people I would have to rely on in the immediate term. And I don't know anything about them. And, you know, I don't know what's going on behind their walls. And then there were just, you know, there are things I look back and there are little things that made it into the movie. There were just little things I experienced. Like I remember when I first moved in, my first night sleeping there, I was like almost asleep. And then somebody just started stomping overhead and just like going back and forth. And the ceiling just like creaking and cracking with every step. And it went on for hours. And I was just like, I've made a terrible mistake. Like I've signed a 1-year lease on this place.
Yep.
And like, I'm never going to sleep again.
I've had a couple horrible encounters with my apartment life. Yeah. But like one time, I just kind of going off what you're talking about, there was a neighbor that lived above me, and he would at 11:30 at night on the weeknights would decide to start practicing Carry On My Wayward Son
on what?
On a bass guitar.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
That's the worst because that's going to come right through the
warbling,
wall.
Yes, and warbling. So it'd just be like this don, don, and like this horrible out of pitch voice that was like just coming down. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me?
And he was singing too?
He was singing.
So can you, if you hear that song, do you break out into hives?
It does kind of make my neck twitch. Like, I
can't ever hear this song
my
ever
little
again.
eyes starts like fluttering. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I think like anybody who's lived in an apartment has probably had some experience like similar to mine or yours.
Like, I had the most Twin Peaks David Lynch experience that I need to share. So
please.
I used to live in this it was a condo that someone was renting out, and it was this really cute little place. It was 4 apartments, 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. And of course, like my roommates and I were friends from college who smoked a lot of weed and like were the youngest people in the building by far. Like everyone had a family except for us. And so then when Twin Peaks: The Return came out, it came out around my birthday and my boyfriend's birthday. So we had a Twin Peaks themed birthday party. So we had like coffee flavored cocktails. Everyone had to wear a costume. So everyone was in costume. We're having a great time. We were playing music. We were probably kind of loud. That's fine. It was like 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday. And all of a sudden, my friend goes, "Do you hear this screaming?"
Oh.
There was a screaming emanating from beneath us. And it was like, this woman was like, oh, like it was like on repeat, like going, ah, ah. And so, of course, like I turn off the music and like drunkenly run downstairs, knock on her door. And I'm like, are you okay? Are you okay? And no one answers. So I run back upstairs. It keeps happening. So the party immediately ends because everyone's freaked the fuck out because there's a woman screaming, not responding during a David Lynch themed birthday party. And so the screaming keeps going on. I walk outside to look in her window, and in her window, she is silhouetted against the window, like staring at me, like with her hands above her head. And I was like, holy shit. Hi, are you okay? She's like, the music is loud. And I was like, okay, we can turn it down. Are you okay? She's like, the music is loud. And I was like, are we going to get murdered? And so basically the next morning, like we all went hungover and went to breakfast and came back, and she like cornered me outside and was like explaining to me that how many decibels the music was and how it was like so loud. And she had just moved in, and I was like, okay, I'm so sorry. And then ever since then, she would watch us through her blinds whenever we left the house. And like,
creepy.
We would see her through the window sitting at a table up by herself with the lights off. With like, it was like the most surreal fucking experience I've ever had. Like, it's one of my favorite stories to tell because I'm like, of course it happened during a David Lynch party. Like, he himself could not have scripted a better moment. So
that's a person who like needs to work on their confrontation skills. Right?
Yeah, because
there was a better way to do that.
Yeah, and obviously, like we were concerned. It wasn't like we were like stopped the party to knock on her door and like make sure she was safe, and she wouldn't answer the door. And I'm like, should we call the cops?
Oh my God.
Oh boy, it's fun. But that's my fun apartment story.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Funny now that it's many years past.
Yes. Yeah, these things are good to look back on. They're not really that great to live through.
No, not at all.
So the cast of One Bedroom though, or One BR, it's phenomenal. Like the guy Giles that plays Brian. Okay, he's a cutie, and like I was like,
that was the goal.
Well, it worked because he's very charming, and also just Nicole. How did you find her?
I mean, it's the most boring story in the world. She put herself on tape for us. You know, we put out a casting call. And she's based in New York, and she just she did a taped audition that blew me away. And the funny thing, the only thing that's sort of interesting about it, but it's not like I don't love this story either because is that we didn't end up casting her initially. So the producers got an opportunity to cast a woman who was the lead on a TV show. Who got interested in the script and wanted to play the role. And she's a good actor, but she was so wrong for the role that I was just like, I was really against it. And I already kind of had my eye on Nicole, but they basically we had this big meeting with me and all the producers, and they were like, look, she has, X Instagram followers, and she's on this show, and basically, we were a tiny movie. We had no budget, and they were like, if we cast her, we're immediately in the black. And, and I was like, I laid out all my objections, like all the things that I thought were a bad idea. And then I said, I understand. And I'll do my best to make it work. Cause they were putting up the money, and this was a business decision, and that's the way the business works. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, I flew out to Toronto and rehearsed with her. And she's really good. She's a good actor. And I came away from that feeling like, okay, maybe we can make this work. Like, we're going to have to really do a lot of work on her look and stuff, and sort of like toning down her personality. But I was like, I think we can make this work. And we sort of went ahead. And then I think it was 5 days before we were supposed to start shooting, she just unceremoniously dropped out.
Good God.
Yeah. Wow. And, we to this day, we don't really know why, but I suspect it was just, we were shooting over Christmas. And this was like her hiatus from her show. And I think she just decided, for the $100 a day or whatever it was we were paying, she was just like, I'd rather have my vacation. So it was not cool. It was like this is why I'm not mentioning her name. It was like a very mean thing to do to a production, and it very nearly sank us.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, the pre-production on this movie was so stressful. But
well, I did hear also that you guys ran into like a fire situation.
Oh yeah. There was I think this might have also played into why she didn't want to come. There were these like crazy wildfires going on in LA right before we were supposed to start shooting. And I think she was concerned about the air quality. She had written some questions about that, and we had assured her like the fires are not near where we're shooting. But, that almost shut us down because our production offices were in the fire zone. And then, I didn't find out about this until after we were already done. But apparently in the middle of production, one of our grip trucks got stolen in the middle of the night. And there was some ring of like production truck thieves, and they went and grabbed one of our trucks, but we had an overnight parking PA in the lot, and he saw it go down and followed this truck like all the way across LA on the freeways, on the phone with the police until they showed up and stopped the truck.
What the God. Fuck?
Yeah, it was crazy. Like this was a snake bit production. I mean, it was like, I haven't even like told you all the casting problems we had, but like we not only lost that lead actress, but we lost, we had cast one of her friends to play Brian. Oh. And then we had a really wonderful, actress lined up to play Miss Stanhope. But her husband got sick right before we were supposed to start shooting, and she had to drop out. So we lost basically 3 of our leads within days
very
of shooting.
Very important parts.
Oh my God.
So the producers really were scrambling to cast, and they were, there was like a day I remember where they were still trying to see if they could get somebody high profile to play Sarah. And I just started begging them. I was like, look, we need a body. Like, can we please cast somebody that we know is going to say yes? Or that, or that at least we have a reasonable chance of saying yes, and also who I think, is the best person for the role. And I'm not talking out of school. Like they have admitted to me that like trying to cast way above our budget was a mistake. And they all, like everybody just is in love with what Nicole did on this movie.
She's
how could you not?
She's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, like, I say this whenever anybody asks me about it. Like, I literally, and this is not an exaggeration, I'm not certain we would have finished the movie if we'd had anybody else in that role. Because, this was
a demanding role.
It's a really demanding role. We had a 15-day original, our original schedule was 15 days. We ended up doing 4 more days of shooting much later after we'd edited the whole movie. But, we were trying to get the whole movie in 15 days. And it's a complicated production. And, that she's doing such intense things. And we had, you've seen the movie, like the coverage is very simple. Oftentimes we were covering a whole scene in 2 angles, two to 3 angles, and we would have time for 2 takes on each setup. And like, she would get there on take 1, like, to these intense,
oh my God,
emotional places.
That's so amazing to hear. 'Cause like,
yeah,
the emotions, I was watching it again, for prep for the podcast, and like, it's just the amount of emotions that she has to go through in like a single scene, from being this vulnerable and strong and emotional to stoic, like all in sometimes the same scene. That it's amazing to me that it was all in like a take or 2.
Yeah. Like, it was uncanny. Like, she is so good. And also just, with one of these things you don't know going in when you're working with someone you don't know, but like, she is just lovely. She was such a professional. There was no ego, this was a new experience for her. This was her first lead on a feature, and flying cross country into a situation she didn't know, and where this, like, really kind of sketchy things would be going on. Like, I could have seen her being very cagey and very nervous, and she was not. She was just like such a professional and very open to sort of talking things through. And she's really smart. She got everything I was trying to do. And then, she would just, on take 1, she would give me these takes where I'm just like, well, we've got it. Let's play around now for our second take. It was just such a luxury, Yeah.
Well, and looking back, I mean, you basically said that kind of the 3 main important characters of this had to be recast, and there are some of my favorite performances in this movie. So I mean, happy accident type thing.
Yeah, that's
right?
the thing. Like, I can't really claim any credit. Like, we got really lucky because we were at the end there. It was just like, can we get somebody in this role so that we don't have to shut down? And Giles was, so Gersh was the agency that Nicole came through. And they were just super helpful. I think, when we cast Nicole, they were like, let's try to support her as best we can. And they got it out to Giles, who, he's a bigger deal than we could have gotten to, I think, otherwise, because he's done a lot of TV and movie roles and stuff. And he read his parts. He didn't even have time to read the whole script because we were so pressed. He read his parts and I think saw something in the character that he thought was interesting and said yes. And then, Susan Davis, that was just a lucky, I don't even know how they found her, but like, Alok loves to tell this story. He's our lead producer, where someone sent her reel to him, and it had a phone number at the end, and he called it thinking he was going to be getting her agent, and she answered the phone. It was just her personal phone number, and
Casual.
he just pitched her the movie, and she said, I've never done a movie before. Sounds like fun. Oh, spoiler. Sorry. We can cut that out, maybe.
We can do a beep or something.
Yeah, do a beep.
So, should we transition to talking about the movie you brought today?
It sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, Dave, what are we talking about today?
Today, we are going to be talking about 2001: A Space Odyssey.
I was going to do the music, and then I completely forgot the music, so that was real awkward.
I would do the music, but I don't think anybody wants to hear that from me.
So for those of you unfamiliar with 2001: A Space Odyssey, the synopsis from IMDb doesn't quite explain the plot, but can you really explain the plot of this movie?
Yeah.
So after discovering a mysterious artifact buried beneath the lunar surface, mankind sets off on a quest to find its origins with help from intelligent supercomputer HAL 9000.
Sure, that's
I feel like
synopsis.
It's kind of a synopsis. It's like those things happen in the film.
It does happen.
Like they happen. That's the order. I mean, like the order in which they happen.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is the funny thing about this movie is like that's actually not a bad synopsis of the plot, because like if you were to take this movie and edit it just to get all the plot points across, the movie could be like 20 minutes long.
Okay, yes, exactly. So, okay, Tell us your horror story about watching this film. Like, how old were you and what happened? I can't believe you watched this as a child. Like, tell us about it all.
So I have this aunt and uncle, my only aunt and uncle, and I just love them. I was always very close to them. And they were, so I was raised in a family of doctors and scientists, essentially. Okay. And I've always been really interested in science. And actually my first career was, I was trained basically as a computer programmer. And that was my first career was in computer software. But I also grew up like with this, sort of out of nowhere love of movies that the rest of my family really didn't share, except for my aunt and uncle, who were huge cinephiles. And so I think they kind of took me under their wing as a budding cinephile. And they made, this is just a questionable decision. I think I was like staying up at their house and I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I was way too young. I think I was somewhere between 8 and 10.
Yeah, that's pretty young.
Yeah. and they just like, probably they just wanted to be rid of me for a couple hours, but they sat me down in front of the TV and put on 2001.
Wait, and they left you there?
I don't remember them watching it with me. I think I was sitting there alone.
That's even worse. And then there's like, we're going to have this like bonding experience and giving you, like exposing you to this masterwork of cinema. And like, nope, we just want you to sit in front of the TV alone and process this by yourself.
What's the longest movie we can
look, I was really young. It's possible they were there and I just was so like keyed in on the movie that I don't remember. But like, my memory of it is sitting there alone in their living room watching this on the TV.
Huh.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's phenomenal.
Yeah. And it just like, I mean, I don't even know where to begin. Like, right from the opening, like I'd never seen a movie that starts on black. Like there's nothing on screen. And then there's this creepy ass music playing, this like weird experimental, like atonal music, just like, that goes on for like 3 or 4 minutes. And I'm just like, what am I looking at? And then you get your production logos, whatever. And then it's called 2001: A Space Odyssey. I'm like, okay, I like Star Wars, like, and then what does it go to? The Dawn of Man.
The Dawn of Man.
It goes to 8 men on the savannah.
Yep.
This like long wordless sequence of these like shrieking ape men like getting chased. One of them gets killed by a leopard.
Yep.
And then as if that's not like, my little brain is like exploding. And then there's this fucking monolith standing there.
Casual,
And I'm just like, I did not know what I was seeing. Like, it was just, I had never, ever, ever seen a movie that was remotely like this. Like, you hear space, and for me, that meant Star Wars.
Yeah.
There were Spielberg movies, E.T.
Yeah.
But this was just not, that at all. And then like the whole middle section of the movie, I think I did a little bit better with. Like there's still scary stuff that happens in there, but like, at least now we're in space and like, there's nice music playing, there's a waltz and, there's spaceships doing stuff. But then you get, sorry, I'm just reliving this whole experience now.
It's great. Continue.
You get to like, I think one of the things that I remember really like disturbing me. Well, I mean, there's like the computer Hal starts murdering people, right? And
boy, does he.
Yeah. And like kills Frank Poole, like when he's on an EVA, he's like outside the spaceship. And then he sends, there's that super creepy shot. It's beautifully set up from a previous shot where like you see the pod in the foreground and he goes out of the pod and he's kind of like flying toward the main spaceship.
Yeah.
And then you just see the pod start turning around.
Yes.
And like all the space, unlike any other space movie, also it's utter silence when they're out in space, which is perfect because that's what it should be. And then you don't even see it. Like you just see the pod start going toward him and the arms are opening up. And then you kind of cut to Dave Bowman, as I recall it anyway, you cut to Dave Bowman like inside the main spaceship and then he just sees like Poole's body go flying by.
Hurtling by.
And so that was super disturbing. But I remember the murder that really like I couldn't handle was when Hal kills the 3 hibernating astronauts. Because literally nothing happens, right? They're already in suspended animation. They're lying there. All you see are like vital signs going by, and then suddenly there's this super close up of a thing that says computer malfunction, and then you see like the life signs one by one start going offline. Yeah. And their faces don't change. It cuts to these shots of them just like sitting there, and that was like so scary to me.
It's so casual and banal and like the evilness of it.
Yes, yeah. There's no like drama to any of it, which is that's like a function of the movie. Like that's the way he did it on purpose, clearly. But it's like so beautifully done. But it, like I've rewatched it many times as an adult, and it's brilliantly done. But like at that age, it was just too much for me. And then like to cap things off, then there's this Stargate sequence where, like I was just like, did not know what I was looking at. Like,
that's what I was most curious about as a kid. Because I can't, honestly, when you suggested this movie, I was like, I cannot imagine being a kid seeing this movie.
Well, I couldn't either.
I couldn't imagine a kid sitting and watching this for 2.5 hours. Like, I could not imagine a kid having the attention span for this movie.
Well, that's the thing is like, I look back at it and I'm like, I love this movie, but like, I'm like
it's
amazed
slow.
I wasn't bored. Yeah, because like, it's really slow. But I think I was just really fascinated with the space stuff because like some of the really slow stuff is the middle section, like where they're going on their EVAs and like they'll just stop and sort of show you the entire docking procedure of a spacecraft. In almost real time. It'll take minutes and minutes and minutes to do.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think I was just really fascinated with space at the time, which is maybe why my aunt and uncle decided to show me this movie. But yeah, then this like, okay, by now I've like forgotten about the weird Dawn of Man 4 million years ago intro. We've had, an hour and a half of space and, it's scary, but it's a movie. And then there's this like acid trip at the end. And, I was just like, what? I was like, I think I felt like Bowman. Like you see these shots of Bowman in that sequence, and it's like they're so creepy. Where it's like the psychedelic stuff is coming at you, and then it cuts to this like a really quick still shot of him with his face completely contorted, just like in horror. And I think like that's what I feel like my experience of this sequence was just like And then suddenly you're in this weird Rococo room with lights coming out of the floor, and he's a young man and he's an old man, and it like that just destroyed my mind. That whole sequence, just like this movie, just like the experience of watching that movie is one of the most indelible cinematic experiences that I've ever had. Like I feel like it rewired my brain in some fundamental way.
It's funny that you say that because like when I posted on Twitter that I was watching this movie, the writer Chris Straub, he wrote and said that this movie changed the course of his life. He saw it at age 4, which I can't. I cannot imagine seeing this movie at age 4, let alone age 8.
No,
I have a 4-year-old in my family right now, and he can't even sit through an episode of Bubble Guppies. Like, there's no way.
No. Oh wow, that's horrifying.
So how did you process this movie being a kid and being basically assaulted by the end with like this audio visual nightmare and kaleidoscope of color and sound? How did you process that?
I honestly don't know. Like I don't remember. I remember other movies giving me nightmares. I don't remember this one specifically giving me nightmares, but I do remember just sitting and thinking about it a lot.
Yeah.
Like it would not sort of leave me alone. And I remember thinking about it a lot. And I remember I don't know if this was after the first viewing, but there was a period where I went through a period where I spent a lot of time drawing the Discovery spacecraft. Like in a lot of detail, like drawing, the big sort of ball section at the front. And then there's all the segments along the middle and the antennas in the middle. I was really like obsessed with drawing that, which I think maybe was some kind of way of me like trying to make it feel okay and concrete in some way.
It.
Yeah, exactly.
Did your aunt and uncle ever ask you what you thought of the movie? Do you remember?
I mean, at the time they probably did, but I don't know that I would have had anything articulate to say.
Just like you start screaming and grabbing your head.
My eyes roll back and I have a seizure.
Monkeys.
Yeah, exactly.
So I have a question. Do we? And I was talking to my partner about this last night. Do you think the ape scene at the beginning is necessary for the film, or do you think it could have been cut and it would have had the same impact?
I think at the time I did not have any idea why that was there or why it was connected to the movie. When I watch it now, it is, to me, it's completely necessary and totally intrinsic. And now it's also like, it's hard for me to separate now because, I got obsessed with this movie for years, and it's still like, if I were to list sort of my top 5 movies, like I can't really rank my favorite movies, but like it's always going to be in my top movies. Like it's just, I think it's such a feat of cinema that, like, even now you watch it and, just the visual effects are the fact that 1968 visual effects still hold up.
That is insane. I guess we can talk about that again because Terry and I were talking about like how this looks better than movies now. Like it
way better.
Looks
and
so
also
good.
like, I mean, it's like there's almost never been another movie that has handled space as realistically as this one does.
Yeah.
And it gives you this like intense sense of like the vastness and the danger of it. Like there's so much to this movie, but like it's really hard for me to separate because I got so obsessed with the movie that like, I read the novel, I read all the sequels, which are not that great. I read the original short story that it was based on, The Sentinel. When you read the novel, the next time you watch the movie, you have a really different relationship with it. Because the movie is very elliptical, right? It's very poetic. Like there's not a lot explained. You never really have a sense of what the monolith is or even what that like Stargate sequence is. I think if you were to just watch the movie, you would not have any idea necessarily, at least on a sort of on a concrete level, like what that was supposed to represent. But, or, maybe somebody would, but like, I certainly didn't. But then,
nope, I didn't either.
you read the novel and like it lays it out pretty solidly. And then, so since then, like watching the movie, I feel like I have the Cliff's Notes. Like I understand what's happening in that Dawn of Man sequence. And it is intrinsically connected. Like they're all, it's the whole movie is kind of about the evolution of man. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's true, that's the first step. And it's sort of the idea that the monolith is there for each of these major leaps that mankind takes.
Yeah.
Sort of like kind of gate checks and like the evolution of evolutionary goals of being like getting to be able to use tools and then being able to leave the earth and then being able to get further in the galaxy and sort of like kind of gates.
Exactly. And then that also gives a key to kind of that last sequence that this is, that it's brought Bowman to, some place that it's kind of simulating an Earth-like environment for him as he transforms into this kind of next evolutionary stage. But, in some ways, like I hate to even, I apologize for saying that to anybody who has not read the book because I don't know that it's necessary to really appreciate the movie.
So it's one of those interesting things where it's like, I think people throughout the last, however many years it's been, 50, 60 years?
It's 52 years, I think.
52?
No, is it? No, 60. Is it 62?
Is it? No. Math is
Sorry,
hard.
High math. It's 50. It's 52, I think.
52. So it's weird.
Don't quote me on that.
That's going to be
52. It's 52. It's 52.
Okay, good, because it's going to be.
Yeah, I used to be a computer scientist, guys. I'm really good at math.
It's like, okay. The weird thing is that I never saw this movie growing up, but I knew about it because it's been referenced so many times in so many different pop culture moments.
Oh my gosh.
I grew up watching The Simpsons, and I remember 2 in particular episodes with Lisa's Pony episode where it actually starts with the dawn of man and where Homer is an ape, and instead of he touches the monolith and then he uses it as like a resting place and tips it over because he's leaning against it. Or like in Deep Space Homer where he's out in space and they do like the the waltz song, da, 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 and he's like eating chips.
Oh yeah, he's like
and
floating
it's like
in 0G eating chips. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, trying to like save the ship from the there's all these little moments that I remember. Or even like the History of the World Part 1 begins with the dawn of man, and it's sort of like a little riff on.
That's right.
There's so many of these little moments. Do you guys have any favorites of like the parodies or riffs or any of that kind of stuff?
Oh man, I mean, it's funny. Like, yeah, I actually I'm recognizing all the ones that you just referenced, but I would not have thought of them.
So the one that pops into my head as like the first one is the scene in Zoolander when they're trying to get in the computer and they start jumping on the table and the music, like the bomb plays and they have a bone, like they pick up a bone to smash the computer. Yeah. I for some reason that is the first one I think of, and it makes me laugh because I'm like, why the fuck was Zoolander be like the first place? But like,
yeah.
Yep, that's the first. That's like my favorite one because it's just like ridiculous in that moment. So
yeah,
that's my
good.
Famous.
Yeah, I can't think of any sort of like parodies or references in that sense, but the one that is popping to mind, which is this isn't a particularly like complimentary one, but I remember when I saw Contact, thinking that they were clearly like when she goes through whatever the machine that takes her to Vega. I was like, well, they're clearly trying to like replicate the feel of the Stargate, and of course you can't make a movie like that without like being aware of it, but I just remember thinking like, well, this feels kind of like a pale imitation.
Yeah, I mean, you can like, the thing is that even if you haven't seen this movie, you've seen people riff on it. I mean, it's everywhere from like some of the designs in WALL-E. I believe that the director of WALL-E actually had this movie as like a go-to for people to watch for when he was designing it, or like Moon. I mean the robot on Gert is it Gertie or Gert in Moon that like talks to him and kind of plays that same sort of like Hal like mentality right.
But a much more benevolent
even like
version.
right. Or even like Mother in Alien, like just sort of like the kind of like overarching computer and even the way that things are filmed. Like I remember when I was watching this for podcast prep, I was like, oh yeah, there's the spaceship kind of like coming into view from like the left side of the screen, and that's like done in all the Alien movies. It's done in like Star Wars. Like it is referenced everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, like it's funny to look at like what science fiction space movies looked like in like 1967 and then what they looked like in 1969, and then you see like how huge an impact this movie made, because there was nothing that looked or felt anything like this before that. And then like you said, like even like Star Wars, which is such a different movie, you watch that movie and just even like the design of like the Death Star. Oh yeah, the way it looks on the outside with like all this sort of like bits of machinery. That's the outside of the Discovery or the Discovery spaceship. Like that's they created this entire sort of like reality of what we think of as space now.
And so I was like, that's an interesting point, because something I was looking at yesterday when I was watching it was like a moment, and it's a very brief moment, and I don't know why it stuck with me, where the men are going to the moon to see the monolith, and they're eating sandwiches and like want some coffee, and they just like have to think of coffee. And I was like, it's so funny the way that this is such a huge sci-fi thing, but then these guys are just drinking coffee in spacesuits. And I know it sounds so weird, but like it was just so interesting to see how these elements of like 1960s culture and society were like integrated into this version of space, and how they were still familiar things despite them, like it's like almost uncanny in a way.
It's so amazing. Like I love that whole first sort of third of the movie where it's simultaneously such a perfect rendering of the future, with the way gravity works, and that beautiful scene where like the flight attendant like picks up the pen from floating and puts it back in his pocket. And then at the same time, it feels so dated in some ways because it has this real like hardcore 60s look to it.
Yeah.
And it's like a Pan Am flight, and they're staying at the Howard Johnsons.
I love that. I love
the Howard Johnsons.
The capitalization of like the space station, where it's like there's like the Hilton and there's like all these like Howard Johnson, and everything like has like a brand attached to it. I was like, oh wow, this is like it would be now if we had this in space.
Exactly. And yeah, just like you were saying, like the amount of time spent just the banalities and the kind of routine of space travel is like, I mean, almost no other director would have been allowed to get away with that, first of all. But like, just like minutes and minutes of conversation on like what kind of sandwiches they have on that moon ship. Yeah. And then like him like eating the weird like food through the straw.
I have thoughts on this. Because like,
Terry has a really cool. Okay, you have really cool thoughts about this.
I feel like the use of food kind of like ties into the sort of evolution of man in it, because like when you first see them off the planet and they're like dealing with space, and we're kind of being introduced to, the woman is sort of haphazardly walking down the aisle, and like it's sort of like they're learning to walk, and the food is presented as almost like baby food. Yeah. And they're like having to eat, like drink liquid of it. And then later on, when they're in the Jupiter section, they're actually eating solid food.
Yeah.
And then by the end of the movie, it's like kind
running,
of like,
yeah.
Right. And so he's like running, which is an awesome shot, by the way. I love that shot of like running in circles. It's sort of like a hamster wheel. Like it's sort of like,
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like, this man is super intelligent, but look at him. He's running in circles like a hamster would, It's sort of like, but like he's eating solid food. And then by the end of the movie, his last thing is his final meal before like he transitions on to being a big baby.
That's
literal
That's
big
right.
baby.
A literal baby.
A literal baby.
A literal baby.
No, I've never put that together, but that's brilliant, I think. And I bet you that was on purpose.
And linked to the food, the scene I also love is when she's bringing the food to the captains of that, like, I think it's like some kind of shuttle, and she like starts walking up in a circle, and I was like, my jaw dropped. And like, it's not that groundbreaking, but it was just so cool. It like so seamlessly happens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, how did he do that in the 60s? Right. Like, it's just so breathtaking.
And it's also just, it's so well designed, that whole section, with those little shots where it starts out looking very mundane. It's just a person walking down or whatever. And then she starts like walking up the wall, right?
Yes, exactly.
And then like walks out upside down, and you're just like, it really does create this sense of the weightlessness in a way that like I think could not have been done, just by seeing people floating around. It doesn't really give you the sense in the same way, this idea that there's like no up and down. I think it's such a great movie.
When did you first see this, Mary Beth?
Yesterday.
Wow.
Yesterday was the first time I saw this movie, and I can't believe I waited so long to watch it.
Well, I'm glad to have given you an excuse to finally watch it.
Seriously, I was wanted to say thank you, because I was like, so for the longest time, like I was just, I'm a film person, like I should have seen it. But I just avoided it for so long, and I got to the point where I was like being a contrarian about it. I'm like, it can't be that good. It can't really that. And dear reader, I was severely mistaken. At the beginning of the film, I was like trying to be a dick, and it started playing, and I was like, the apes, I'm already bored. And then my boyfriend was like, you have no idea what's coming for you.
Yeah, you really do have to put yourself in the rhythm of the movie. Like it would not be the right movie to like watch like on a Friday night when you're looking for something exciting or whatever.
No, and so, but then all of a sudden I was like sucked in. I was like, and then so my boyfriend who's seen it wasn't going to watch it with me, and then he got sucked in, and so the two of us were watching it, and I kept gasping, and I cried a couple times, and I didn't think I would cry, and I got very emotional, and it is one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen, and like it's the hype machine was real, guys. I shouldn't have doubted it for this one, because it was just like almost indescribable, the feeling of watching this movie for the first time.
Yeah, I can only imagine watching it for the first time as an adult. I'm so glad you got to have that experience.
Well, and I'm also kind of glad I watched it now, because I think as I've gotten older, I've gotten more of an appreciation for slow burn and like slow stuff, and I really, really love that. Like in the past couple of years, I've really started loving slow atmospheric films, and I feel like if I'd watched this like in college or like even in my early 20s, I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much. But like, so have you seen the film Jean Dielman, the 3-hour movie about the woman who is a housemaid or a housewife?
No, I don't know it.
Mm-mm.
So it's this, There's a reason I'm saying this. So Jean Dielman is this 3.5-hour long movie that feels really mundane, but it sucks you in with these like routines and patterns she does. And so this felt similar to that experience where you like, obviously this is in space, so it's a little bit more exciting, but the pacing feels very similar where like nothing is happening a ton, but you're still really sucked into it. And you just like get really emotionally invested in something that you did not expect yourself to get emotionally invested in.
Right.
And so...
Yeah, movies that can do that are miraculous. Like I would not have the self-confidence to try anything like that. Like, I would be so scared of boring the audience. Like, it would just take such self-confidence.
That happened though. I was like, because there's like, apparently when it first premiered, people were like, "What the fuck is this?" And like, people did not like it. And I think Arthur C. Clarke, who wrote the book, and Kubrick were really bummed. Yeah. I think people did not understand what was happening. And I was like, that's fair. I feel like in the 60s, this comes out and you're like, what is this?
Yeah. And I think to be fair, they actually, I believe they recut it and cut some time out of it.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that.
I think it was a bit longer when it was first released, but this was, in the 60s, the way they would do these releases is they would roll them out slowly. And a movie would open over the course of months. And so they had time to kind of like play with it.
That's so fascinating.
This was like, this is pre-Blockbuster era. So that this whole idea of like the opening weekend, I don't think really existed back then. And so, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I could be, some Kubrick fan is going to yell at me about this, but like, I think
I do remember reading. Yeah. I remember reading like in the first showing of it, he was he paused a bunch to like go up there and fiddle with even the cut that he was showing the audience at that time. So I believe that probably did happen.
Yeah, I have a recollection that they did some recutting after like the very opening, and then and then I think, I don't know how accurate this is, but the story about it always was that like it was not looking like it was going to be a hit, and then the hippies got a hold of it, and they realized that if they got high, it was like an amazing, transcendent experience, and they all went to go watch it high.
That's funny. I actually told my boyfriend, I was like, we should do acid and watch this movie. He's like, no, why would we do that?
No, the movie is acid. You don't need
I know.
I
feel like if you did drugs watching that movie, you'd be like, I have to go.
Yeah, I think it would be too much.
Time it for the hit to hit, like right as he's going through the Stargate.
Oh God!
Oh no!
Yeah, wrong.
Incorrect.
Yeah.
Oh jeez. So I think I know Mary Beth wrote this question down, but I gotta ask: faked the moon landing? What do we think?
We gotta talk about the moon landing conspiracy theory because it's so stupid and I love it.
I mean, I am not a person who generally, I don't know that there's ever been a conspiracy theory that I have come close to believing. I do remember hearing a totally bonkers conspiracy theory. It wasn't about the moon landing, and I'm probably going to get it wrong, but it was, somebody's theory was that every photograph we have of the moon has also been faked because the moon is actually like rainbow colored.
What?
Excuse me?
Yeah. I unfortunately, I don't. Somebody told me this, and I was so sort of stunned by the nonsensicalness of it that I couldn't even really process it. Yeah. So I'm probably getting it wrong again, but
it sounds unfortunately, that sounds like a thing people would say.
I mean, people will say the world today is lost its fucking mind.
Lost its fucking
mind.
People
believe in anything. It's insane.
I know. It's insane.
All you need is enough followers to make it a fact.
A Facebook page and you're good.
So it wasn't one of the, I don't know if I'm making this up or not, but wasn't one of the theories that because Danny Torrance in The Shining had an Apollo 11 sweater, that was some kind of teaser that the moon landing was fake?
It was faked.
I don't know. That seems like a bit of a stretch to me, but.
Yeah, this was one of the theories in Room 237, which is the documentary about The Shining, was that Kubrick helped them fake the moon landing. And then The Shining was his coded apology for doing that, I think, was the idea. Which is so super weird given that, why would you, if you were going to fake the moon landing, if you were going to have a famous filmmaker fake the moon landing, why would you use a filmmaker who's making a movie literally about, where they are literally faking a moon landing?
It seems too obvious. It's too obvious. And also,
come on, it would look better.
Well, okay, that's okay, Terry. I was going to say that. Like, my partner and I both said, like, it would look so much better if he did it. Like, there's no way that he would have let his creation of the moon landing would look like that. Like, there's no way.
Standards.
There's no way.
Standards.
There's no way. I just want to bring it up because I think it's. I mean, obviously, there's a moon part in the film, and all I could think about was like the moon landing conspiracy. It's so stupid, but it's so fun. It just makes me laugh. Just like people really do just want to like throw random things out there.
Yep. I think somebody actually made a movie about Kubrick faking the moon landing. I can't remember what it was called, but I remember maybe 5 to 10 years ago, something came out where
there's a found footage movie called Lunopolis. It's not about Kubrick, but it's about these two guys who have discovered that there's a moon base on the moon and how they're getting tracked down by the government.
Wow.
I haven't watched it. I've heard it's actually pretty good. It looked cheesy, but like I'll give anything a chance. Apparently it's actually awesome and weird. So
all right, I'll add that to my list with Jean Dielman.
Very different movies.
Right.
Very different movies.
Making a night.
What a weird double feature that would be.
I have to ask, because a lot of people question this. Why did Hal break bad? Why do you think that he malfunctioned, or was it a malfunction?
So this is another thing where like I unfortunately I can't give sort of my own theory because it's essentially explained in the novel. Or maybe it's explained. I think it's actually explained in one of the sequels.
Okay.
So I kind of know what the authorial intent was. And it's another one of these things where I can't kind of unsee it now when I watch the movie.
Yeah.
Well, okay, Terry, what do you think? And then you can tell us, Dave, what the real answer is. The real answer.
I don't think it was a malfunction. I think my read of it is because, you know, he knows about the monolith. He knows it's out there, and you see that entire snippet up to when he does decide to kill everybody is like, these humans are lazy as fuck. You know, he's like lounging in his chair, and the call comes in, and he's like, "Oh, Hal, can you move me closer to the video?"
Right.
He's like, "Oh, can you prop me up a little bit? Oh no, that's too far. Put me back down." Like, Hal is doing everything for these lazy ass motherfuckers who don't do anything except run around this hamster wheel and watch videos and eat.
It's true.
And watch stuff on their iPad. Which, hello, iPad.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like, if I was this computer and I was this smart and I knew that I was smarter than these men, I mean, you see that he beats the guy in chess, and you know that there is this like another gateway to like potentially unlocking something. I would want to kill them all because I would think they're not useful. I would think that they're like, they don't deserve this. I deserve this.
Okay,
if I am this infinite.
Exactly same. What? That's the exact same thing I thought. I was like, he's killing all these motherfuckers because he wants to be that evolved being, which I get. I'd be like, all right, do it. This is why I also think the beginning is so important, because you see it sets up with the dawn of man, this idea of like, these apes are living. I mean, they don't like each other, but they're living in relative peacefulness. I mean, they yell at each other, and it's not until they get intelligence and they realize that they can use this tool to bash each other in, and they start to like eat meat as opposed to like eating grubs and stuff. That like, it's this kind of like the ability of intelligence is going to lead to violence, and it's going to lead to using tools for different ways. And so you see this battle again played out now with like the tool that man created and man fighting each other. Right. And so that's kind of like how I took it.
Yeah, that's I love that take, and I think it's not super far off from what's in the book. And again, it's been a long time since I read the novel, so I don't remember it in exact detail. But I think it was essentially something along the lines that that basically Hal had been given contradictory instructions. Basically, that he was that I think the success of the mission was absolutely paramount, and that he also had to keep it secret from the humans. And it created some kind of cognitive dissonance. And possibly there was an element that like his sort of interpretation of the sanctity of the mission being the most important thing, he felt was threatened by the idea that they were going to shut him down. Because if they did, then they would not have access to the information about the mission. That he was the only person.
Kind of is a logic.
Yeah, I think there was some sort of like logical paradox that they put him into.
Oh, interesting.
Now, what's also interesting about this idea that you brought up about like a couple things about the sort of evolution of Hal and him wanting to sort of be the one who has this experience is I believe in maybe the second sequel, Hal does get evolved. Like so the spaceship gets left out there. And then I think in the second book, they go back and they find it and they reconnect Hal and figure out what went wrong. And then in the third book, which is like 50 years later, I think Hal somehow, his consciousness ends up on Europa or something. And again, the Arthur C. Clarke fans are screaming at the podcast right now, but like, I believe he kind of gets Star-Childed the same way that Dave Bowman did.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
But the other little tidbit in terms of like, I think your take about the sort of the idea of tools and weapons essentially is really great. And this is another detail I remember from the book, or maybe this was in the screenplay, but is never clear in the movie. You know, the famous shot where the ape man throws the bone up in the air.
Oh, I love it.
And then it's like the 4 million year cut to like the orbiting space station. So that apparently that orbiting space station is an orbiting nuclear weapon.
Oh.
That the Earth is now ringed with these orbiting nukes. And there's this kind of like balance of terror with all these countries having nukes kind of in orbit around the Earth.
Oh my God.
Which gives you a new angle on that cut, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of wondered if because I wasn't quite sure what it was when it lands and they focus on it, and it doesn't surprise me if it would be some kind of like nuclear weapon, because I think the intent of that was definitely clear.
Got it. Yeah.
And so I'm not. I would like to hear everyone's reactions to Hal dying, because I cried.
Oh yeah, that is. I mean, it's heartbreaking.
That is maybe the top saddest cinematic death I've ever seen, because it's so. Again, this is my first time seeing it. I had no idea. Like, I had kind of like I knew about the part, but I didn't realize it was going to be so emotional, and so much of him being like in a monotone saying, "I can feel it," and he can feel death, and it's such a weird. My mind is going, and then he starts singing the song.
Yeah,
and
that
it's
first
just
song
like
he learned.
Yes, like it's. I'm getting sad just thinking about it.
I think you like anybody who has a heart is going to be moved by that scene. It's like, and that's another thing. It's so brilliant is like, there's the trope of like the evil computer that, is killing off the crew, and he's doing that in his own way. But like, then it turns 180 degrees around on you. And like, you have this sense of like a being who wants to live. It's like, for that time, especially, like the representation of artificial intelligence is so far. I mean, even today, most representations of artificial intelligence, I don't think are equal to that in sort of sophistication.
I mean, okay, going with his death, he says that he was born on January 12th, 1992. How is it this movie that Hal's birth in 1992 and it's 2020 and I still can't get Siri to understand me? I'm just saying. Well,
Kubrick was a little optimistic, I guess. I mean, that's which maybe is the only time anyone's ever said that sentence. But yeah, I think like maybe his timeline was a little off. I think like at that time probably there was kind of like a belief in the the supremacy of technology, that we were going to be able to solve any of these problems. But
instead of kind of exacerbating a lot of them.
Right, it's like, what would Kubrick think of social media? I think he could have some real fun with it.
His brain would probably explode, and then he'd make a movie about it, and we'd all be like, "Yep, that's it.
Yep,
no one make any more movies."
Yep.
So, do we feel that this movie is pessimistic or optimistic at the end?
I feel it's tremendously optimistic.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, every beat of the movie is sort of mankind like stepping into the unknown and evolving. It's clear-eyed, like there's no illusions about, the fact that like you said, a tool is also a weapon, and that applies to a bone or a spaceship or a supercomputer. But, it's also like, even in the treatment of this sort of like evil computer trope, it's not like, I never get the sense that like this is a cautionary tale against the advancement of technology. Like technology is what gets them out there. Technology is what gets them to, to this breakthrough in evolution. And then that last shot is, however you interpret it, it's something about like mankind as in its infancy and like, growing into the next phase of evolution. Like to me anyway, I think it's probably the most optimistic movie Kubrick ever made.
Huh. Interesting.
I don't know. What's your take?
What about you, Mary Beth? I'm curious.
So my initial thought was actually pessimistic because I wouldn't say it's a cautionary tale about technology by any means, but I think it's about arrogance a little bit. I felt like a lot of this film was about like, okay, like we don't know what this thing is, but we can deal with it. Like we can handle it. We can touch it. We can send someone to Jupiter to get to it. And then when they finally get to that new monolith, well, the first time on the moon, it starts screaming at them and doesn't take a picture of it. And so, again, I feel like that's kind of like Kubrick laughing at people thinking that they can kind of covet the unexplainable. And then when they go to Jupiter, when he goes through the whole like Stargate, it is like, it defies any explanation and anything we could have comprehended. And like, again, I don't know if it's necessarily pessimistic, but I feel like there is a lot to say about like our kind of assumptions that we are the supreme and that we can control things and that we know what they're going to be, because every step of the way in this movie we realize like we can't control things. So that was my kind of take on it. But I also see the optimism in terms of like things are advancing and like even within that.
And this is another thing that might not ever have been explained fully in the movie, but that scream on the moon, that's a trigger essentially. So the monolith was placed on the moon with the idea that once mankind was able to escape the cradle and make it to the moon, they would be advanced enough to take the next step into space. And so when they uncover it and they touch it, that scream is it sending a signal, and it's sending the signal toward Jupiter, which is why they are going to Jupiter.
I also think it makes me a little bit like anxious because it feels like we're not in control.
Well, yeah, which is
obviously
classic Kubrick.
Classic
right?
Kubrick. Yeah. I was going to say, like, it is a little bit nerve wracking to me. Something that always kind of freaks me out because I know it's true. It's like realizing that we're all kind of puppets to something bigger, and I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing. Maybe it's both.
I mean, I guess it's comforting if you can accept it in some way, right? The sort of like surrendering yourself to the vastness of the universe. The famous Kubrick has a famous quote, which I'm going to mangle, but it's essentially something along the lines of like the terrifying thing isn't that nature is or that the universe is hostile. It's that it's indifferent.
Yeah.
That you get a real sense of that from this movie. Just like, that this, space isn't trying to kill you. It's just gonna. Right, like we're not meant to be out there.
Indifference
it's not actively killing you. It's just going to.
Indifference is such a good way to like just like a word for this movie. Like in a good way, it's indifferent because then you're kind of able to project your own emotions onto it in a way.
Yeah, it's very poetic in that way. I agree.
Yeah, but Terry, what do you think? Pessimistic, optimistic, both?
I really see it as pessimistic. I think And the reason why is because I seeing that baby at the very end and like this new life form that's happening, I think it's the end of humanity. I think it's like it's done and it's another stage of some kind of like life cycle. And the entire time, whenever we see man in this movie evolve, it comes with violence. Comes with. And so it always like leaves me with this like really sad feeling. Like it's so weird because it's triumphant at the end. You get the very triumphant music, and I don't know how to feel about it. It just always makes me feel like, well, that baby's gonna fuck some shit up. Like, I feel like it's the end in some way of humanity.
I never interpreted it that way. Like to me that last shot feels so positive. Like
that's so fascinating.
Like
I thought it was so negative. I was like, this baby's gonna eat everybody. Like not like actually, but it did feel very much like this is over. Like this star child is coming and like it's over for people.
I sort of like pictured that star child as being us, like on some kind of metaphorical level. Like it's not like a literal giant baby that's coming to after the world, that it's like it's a representation of sort of where we are, that we're about to be born into, you know, being a spacefaring civilization. And somehow, I guess this is probably my own sort of like rose-colored vision that like, you know, that we essentially, you know, as awful as things feel, you know, even specifically right now, like if you look at the vast sweep of history, like we have become progressively less violent and less punitive, and, you know, for the vast majority of people, things have actually gotten much, much better over the last, you know, if you take the long view, over 1,000 years or something.
Right.
And I guess that's sort of what I bring to it when I look at that last image.
Well, and I kind of do wonder if some of it might be the kind of interplay between Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke, because like, I think that might be why there's different reads for it, because they both, you know, worked on this together, and the script and the book were both, you know, co-written by both of them. Because like I remember reading one of the books that I really loved growing up by Arthur C. Clarke was Childhood's End, and it's all about this like it kind of feels almost like a prelude to this movie where, you know, once humanity finally reaches this next like level of evolution, they basically become all one with these aliens. From what I remember, it's been so long since I've read it, but
yeah, I've never read
it's a very like positive look at how humanity eventually will all become one. And so like, and I kind of watching this movie over the weekend, and I was like doing some research into Arthur C. Clarke some more. I was like, I can really kind of see that being like the stepping stone for a side of this movie.
Yeah.
And I just feel like it's kind of like, it's sort of like AI, like this, you know, AI, the
yes,
Steven Spielberg movie was started out as sort of like this kind of like Kubrick / Spielberg like togetherness.
Yeah, it's like a weird unholy combination of like these two totally incompatible philosophies.
And I still kind of feel that way about Arthur C. Clarke and him working together.
That's
because
really
like I see a lot of what Kubrick has to do is a lot of his movies are very cynical. They have a very cynical outlook on humans, on humanity.
Yeah.
And Isaac Asimov. Arthur C. Clarke has like a very, almost, from the stuff that I've read of his, is almost like he has a much more positive outlook. And so together they sort of make this, and I think that what's probably what makes this movie so interesting to watch is that there are so many different ways of reading into every little aspect of it.
That I love that take. That's that probably both interpretations are baked into every frame of that movie, because it is the product of these two kind of like opposite minds. Yeah. Now I got to go watch it again. Damn it.
So do we want to wrap up and give this a rating out of 5? All right, Terry, how many I'm Afraid I Can't Do That Daves out of 5 do you give 2001: A Space Odyssey?
So it's interesting. I saw this movie for the first time maybe like 5 years ago, and I watched it with my brother at his house, and he had like 2 dogs running through, and like everyone's walking through like the area, and like I was bored to tears. I'm not going to lie. I was bored to tears. It was not the right way of watching this movie. And so I was a little anxious of watching it this week, because I was like, 2.5 hour movie. But like I sat down, I had my noise canceling headphones on, and I started watching it, and it immediately sucked me in. And I went back to look at my letterbox. I think I gave it like a 3-star when I first saw it. This is a 5. I'm Afraid I Can't Do That, Daves, for me. I think just this conversation, just the different ways of reading this movie, the effect on cinema, the effect on everything from science fiction movies to even hell. There was a Mad Men episode that was called Monolith, and it had a black monolith in it. Like you can't look at especially science fiction movies out today without seeing them trying to, in some way, shape or form, outdoing this movie that in '68 looks better than most movies released today. I'm amazed at some of the model usage that they get, and how real it looks, and how it has a sense of place, how it has a sense of scope within the frame. So I got to give this 5 for me. What about you, Mary Beth?
I'm also giving this 5. I'm afraid I can't do that, Dave's out of 5. This is my first time seeing it, and I am just absolutely blown away with how spectacular it is, how much it's influenced pop culture in general, film in general, and just how fucking beautiful it is to look at. I
Gorgeous.
was just so absorbed in it. I didn't realize I would have such an intense emotional reaction. It felt like a 2.5 hour long panic attack in a good way. And like, the way I was able to get so emotionally invested into this film that I was expecting to kind of have a detached relationship from. It was such a good thing. I think I was being very cynical when I saw this, when I was going into watching it, and I'm so glad I did. So Dave, thank you for making me watch this. You've changed my life, man. And now I want to watch it again, which is so funny. And like, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it, and it's bizarre. Like, it's such a weird experience. Again, in a good way, but I can't get it out of my head.
Now imagine being 8 and seeing it for the first time.
That's my thing. I was like, I can barely conceive of this as a 27-year-old, but I guess like when you're a kid, there must be other like really weird, cool things going through your head though. Like I would wonder like what.
Yeah, like what you make of any of it.
Like what you make of it, but Dave, how many? You have the final word. How many? I don't think I can do that. Dave's out of 5. Do you give this?
2. No, of course. I mean, like, it will surprise nobody that I give this 5. I'm afraid I can't do that, Dave's out of 5. Yeah, I mean, this is one of my favorite movies of all time, despite what it did to me as a 10-year-old or an 8-year-old or whatever it was. Yeah, I mean, everything you guys said, like, I don't have a lot to add to it, really. This movie it was revolutionary in its time. I think it's still revolutionary today. There's still no movie that's like it in sort of the way the story is told, in how poetic it is and how elliptical it is. And at the same time in like how sort of like deeply researched it is and how sort of concretely real, like the way they're able to have this sense of almost mystical scope and awe and the scope of time that it covers. And at the same time, it's so mundane and concrete in so many of its details. Like, I think it's a miracle of a movie. And yeah, I mean, 6 if I could give it 6.
Yeah, you can give 6.
Give it 6.
We don't have rules here.
What are rules?
There are no rules.
Well, thank you so much, Dave, for joining us to talk about 2001: A Space Odyssey. Where can our listeners find you, and do you have anything coming up you can share?
So I am barely on social media. I've been our distributors keep telling me to tweet and Instagram, and I do have handles. I think I'm at dmarmor on Twitter. I'm at David_Marmor on Instagram, and I will occasionally be on there, but I'm not good at it. So I'm not easy to find that way, but like I'm there. I'm participating in the 21st century. And right now what I'm doing is, wrangling a toddler and being stuck at home, but I'm also rewriting, my next movie, which I'm doing with the same producers, from One Bedroom. Cool. It's a very, very different movie. It's science fiction. And they have forbidden me to say anything more about it. So I can't tell you, I can't tell you much, but,
is it going to be a 2.5 hour Odyssey of humankind's existence?
Definitely not. I think that's been done as well as it can be done. But it's funny. I've always been, I'm a huge Kubrick nerd. Like, nobody will be surprised to hear that. And there definitely I'm reaching for some Kubrickness in this.
Cool.
Awesome.
It's something I'm really, really excited about. This one. This is a script that is really close to my heart, and I'm super excited that I now have an opportunity to make it at such time as movies are being made again.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And everyone stream One Bedroom on Netflix.
Yes.
It's on there now.
Yeah, go watch
Please
it. It costs you nothing.
Enjoy
you already
it.
have Netflix.
It costs you nothing. Go enjoy it.
Yeah. Yes, please.
It's a good movie.
Yeah.
It's a great movie, guys. So, listeners, you've heard from us. Listeners, you've heard from us, but we want to hear from you. What was your experience with 2001: A Space Odyssey? Send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com or reach out directly to us on Twitter. I'm at MB McAndrews.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, keep the conversation going by chatting with the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe.
Thank you to Steve Bronald for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. And thank you to everyone for listening. Stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.
Won't somebody please think of the children? Won't somebody please think of the children? Somebody please think of the children!
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is the briefing room?
It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.